My brother showed up late to my retirement party with a special gift, a busted defibrillator from the junkyard, so I smiled and announced I bought his condo, and evicted him on the spot. I should have known Darren would pull something. He always did when the spotlight wasn't on him. My name's Lila Harper. I'm 52 years old, and I live in Lexington, Kentucky. I just retired after 15 years as a paramedic, and tonight was supposed to be a celebration of that, my hard work, my years of saving lives, all of it. The party was at McKinley's, a little bar and grill downtown. All my coworkers were there, some old friends too. We had balloons, drinks, even a cake with a little toy ambulance on top. I was standing up by the mic, laughing and thanking everyone, when Darren swaggered in, carrying a big wrapped box. Everyone turned to look at him, and my stomach tightened. He was late, of course, making sure everyone noticed his grand entrance. Got a special gift for the woman of the hour, Darren said, flashing that wide, fake grin of his. There was some scattered applause as he carried the box up to me. It was heavy. I made some joke about needing a forklift, trying to keep things light, and peeled back the wrapping paper. The laughter died pretty quick once I lifted the lid. Inside was a busted old defibrillator, scratched and cracked, like it had been hauled out of a junkyard. Sitting on top was a note, written in Darren's messy handwriting. Time to let the real heroes shine. For a second, I just stared at it. My hands tightened around the box. In the crowd, there was that awful kind of laughter, awkward, forced, like nobody knew if it was okay to laugh or not. Darren clapped me on the back, way too hard. Come on, sis. It's just a joke, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Lighten up. I looked out at all the faces, some people chuckling nervously, others looking down at their drinks, and I felt something in me snap. 15 years of pulling people out of car wrecks, patching gunshot wounds on sidewalks, doing CPR in grocery store parking lots, and this was how my own brother chose to honor me? I smiled. Real small, real tight. You're right, Darren, I said, my voice calm and even. It is time to move on. And speaking of moving, I think now's a good time to tell you, you're being evicted. The room went dead silent. Darren's grin faltered. What? I pulled my phone out of my pocket and scrolled for a second before holding it up. Got the final notice right here. I bought your condo's mortgage months ago when you fell behind. Gave you every chance to get it together, but you didn't. So now, you've got 30 days to move out. Someone in the crowd actually gasped. Darren's face turned bright red, like he couldn't decide if he was embarrassed or furious. You're joking, he said, forcing a laugh. I shrugged. Nope, not even a little. And with that, I set the broken defibrillator down on the table next to the cake, picked up my drink, and took a long, slow sip. Happy retirement to me. As the night dragged on, I sat there nursing my drink, letting the noise of the party fade into the background. All I could think about was how it had always been this way with Darren. Always. Growing up, Darren could do no wrong. He had that easy charm, that big smile, the kind of swagger that made adults eat right out of his hand. Teachers, coaches, neighbors, everyone loved him. My parents thought he was the second coming of Elvis Presley or something. Me? I was the quiet one, the try-hard, the one who actually did my homework and didn't get detention every other week. But no matter what I did, it was never enough to get the kind of praise Darren got just for showing up. I remember when I first told him I wanted to be a paramedic. I was 16, dead serious about it. We were sitting on the back porch, and he laughed so hard he nearly dropped his cigarette. A paramedic? He said, shaking his head. What, you think you're gonna save the world or something? Please, Lila, get real. I should have ignored him, but back then, I still cared what he thought. The night before my entrance exam for paramedic school, Darren decided to throw a party. Not just a few friends, I'm talking full-blown rager. Music blaring, beer pong in the living room, people throwing up in the bushes. I begged him to keep it down. I even sat in my room with the door shut, trying to cram medical terms into my head while the walls shook from the bass. At about 2 in the morning, someone, I think it was Darren's idiot friend Ray, banged on my door and yelled, "Come take a shot with us, Nurse Lila." I cried that night, quietly, into my textbook. The next morning, running on 3 hours of sleep, I dragged myself to the exam. I passed, barely, and when I got home, you'd think Darren might apologize. Maybe just say he was proud of me. Instead, he slapped me on the back and grinned. Tough love, sis. You needed to loosen up. Bet my pep talks got you through it, huh? He actually told our parents that I owed my success to him, that he motivated me, and they believed him. It didn't stop there. Over the years, Darren always seemed to need something. A few $100 here, a place to crash just for a couple weeks that always turned into months. Every time he screwed up, he found a way to make it my responsibility. He had this trick where he'd make you feel like a bad person for even hesitating. Come on, Lila, you're doing so well. Don't be selfish. Family helps family. You wouldn't let your big brother end up on the street, would you? And every time, I gave in. Every single time. He never once paid me back, never once said thank you like he meant it. And somehow, even after all that, even after everything I did for him, Darren still stood in the middle of my retirement party and handed me a broken piece of junk, just to humiliate me. I set my empty glass down hard enough that it rattled. Not anymore, The party had thinned out a little by then. Some folks had made polite excuses and left early after Darren's stunt, but a good number stuck around, hovering near the bar, pretending not to stare at us. Darren, meanwhile, had started making the rounds like nothing had happened, slapping backs, telling jokes, acting like the king of the castle. It made my skin crawl. I watched him lean over to my old partner, Hank, laughing about how some people just can't take a joke. Hank didn't laugh back. I stood up, slow and steady, and walked to the center of the room. Darren saw me and flashed that same greasy smile, the one he always used when he thought he was winning. You know, I said, raising my voice just enough to carry over the low music, there's something I forgot to mention earlier. The room went quiet again. Even the bartender paused, bottle in midair. I pulled my tablet out of my bag and tapped the screen a few times. It took about 2 seconds to pull up the document I needed, the property record. I wasn't planning to say anything tonight, I continued, turning the screen so Darren, and everyone else, could see it, but since you brought up real heroes and all, I guess it's as good a time as any. There it was, big and bold, my name, listed as the owner of Darren's condo. The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried to laugh it off. You're kidding, he said, voice a little too loud. Come on, Lila, don't mess around. I kept my voice calm, almost gentle. I bought the mortgage 6 months ago, paid it off in full, was gonna give it to you outright, as a surprise. A fresh start. The room was dead silent. But, I added, letting the word hang there like a guillotine blade, after tonight, I changed my mind. A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd. Someone, I think it was my supervisor, Trish, muttered, holy crap. Darren's face twisted, confusion and panic battling it out. You can't just kick me out. You can't. I can, I said, still smiling. And I am. You've got 1 week to vacate. 1 week. I wanted him to feel the weight of it. Darren took a step forward like he might try to argue, but nobody came to his defense. Not even the cousins he used to get drunk with, not the old family friends who used to ruffle his hair and call him a rascal. Everyone just stood there, watching him sink. For once in his life, Darren Harper had no way to charm his way out, and it felt better than I ever could have imagined. The morning after the party, my phone blew up before I even had my first cup of coffee. Missed calls, voicemails, a dozen angry texts lighting up the screen like a slot machine. At first, I didn't even look. I just sat at my kitchen table with my mug in both hands, staring out the window at the gray, cloudy sky, feeling lighter, like a 100-pound weight had finally slid off my shoulders. But after a while, curiosity got the better of me. I scrolled through the messages, one by one. Mom, I can't believe you humiliated your brother like that. Family forgives, Lila. Dad, you're being spiteful. Darren was just joking. Uncle Rick, come on, Lil. It's not that serious. You didn't have to ruin his life. Cousin Amy, really disappointed in you. Thought you were better than this. I almost laughed. Ruin his life? All I did was stop bailing him out. Then came the kicker. Darren's post on Facebook. A long, whiny paragraph about how he was blindsided by my cruelty and how he had nowhere to go because of one silly misunderstanding. Pictures of him packing boxes, looking all pitiful, like some sad country song come to life. The likes and comments started rolling in immediately. Distant cousins, old neighbors, people who didn't even know the half of it, chiming in about how family should stick together and Lila should be ashamed. I put the phone down and snorted into my coffee. By lunchtime, my parents showed up at my front door, looking like they were coming to stage an intervention. Can we talk? Mom said, clutching her purse like she might throw it at me if I said no. I stepped aside and let them in, mostly because I didn't feel like having a scene on my porch. They sat down stiffly at the kitchen table, the same one I'd bought for them 5 years ago when their old one broke. Of course, they never mentioned that. They never mentioned anything unless they needed more. You need to fix this, Dad said, pointing a finger like I was a misbehaving kid. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Fix what, exactly? You embarrassed Darren, Mom said, her voice tight. At your own retirement party. I shrugged. He embarrassed me first. Mom waved her hand like that didn't count. It was a joke, Lila. It wasn't funny, I said flatly. And it wasn't just about the party. It's about the years of crap he's pulled. The money, the lies, the constant freeloading. Dad opened his mouth, probably to say something about being the bigger person. I cut him off. Let me ask you something, I said. When Darren needed a new car, who loaned him the money? They shifted uncomfortably. When he couldn't make rent, who paid it? More silence. When he needed a place to stay, who gave up their own spare room for a year and a half? Mom fidgeted with her purse strap. It's not about. No, I said, voice low but firm. It is about that. It's about the fact that I have spent half my life cleaning up Darren's messes while everyone looked the other way because it was easier to let me handle it. Dad cleared his throat. Family, I snapped, doesn't mean one person gives and the other just takes. They stared at me like they didn't even recognize me. Maybe they didn't. Maybe I was finally someone they couldn't guilt into silence. I stood up straighter. He's got a week. That's generous. And I'm done talking about it. They left a few minutes later, Mom sniffling into a tissue. Dad muttering under his breath. I didn't walk them out. I didn't feel bad. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt right. It was 2 days later when Darren showed up at my door. No warning, no text, just a frantic knock that rattled the glass. I considered not answering. Honestly, part of me wanted to sit on the couch and let him stand out there looking like a fool, but curiosity won out. I opened the door and there he was, Darren, looking nothing like the cocky guy from my retirement party. His hair was a mess. His face was red and blotchy, like he'd been crying or drinking, maybe both. He held a crumpled grocery bag in one hand like he didn't know what to do with it. "Lila, please," he said, voice shaking. "Can we talk?" I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. "Talking's not gonna change the clock, Darren." He took a shaky breath. "I know I screwed up. I know I messed up the party and a lot of other things. But I can fix this. I'll get a job, I swear. I'll pay you rent. I'll even pay back what I owe you." I just stared at him. How many times had I heard that exact promise? I couldn't even count anymore. Every time he hit a wall, he made the same speech. Different day, same script. "I mean it this time," he said quickly, seeing the doubt on my face. "I can change. I will. Just don't kick me out. Give me a chance." I let the silence stretch between us until even the birds in the trees seemed to go quiet. "You know what the real problem is, Darren?" I said, my voice steady. "It's not just about the money. It's not even about the party. It's about the fact that I don't trust you anymore." His face crumpled like I'd hit him. "I'm not your enemy," I said, softer. "But I'm not your safety net, either. Not anymore." He took a step closer. "Come on, Lil. You can't just throw me out like some stray." I shook my head. "You threw yourself out. You just didn't notice at the time." For a second, it looked like he might cry for real. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. And then, just like that, the sadness snapped into anger. "Fine," he spat. "You're just bitter. Always have been." He turned and stomped down the steps, the crumpled grocery bag swinging wildly from his hand. I watched him go until he disappeared around the corner. Then I shut the door, locked it, and leaned my back against it. My hands were shaking a little, but I didn't regret it, not one bit. It didn't take Darren long to come up with a new plan. By the next afternoon, I started getting messages. Not from family this time, from old coworkers, mutual friends, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey, Lila, just wanted to check in. Heard some stuff. Hope you're okay. Lila, if you need anything, I'm here." Is it true what Darren posted? I frowned and opened Facebook. And there it was, Darren's big public pity party, posted for the world to see. A long, rambling post about how he had been betrayed by his own sister, about how money changes people, about how he was being evicted out of spite after one little misunderstanding at a party. He even tagged me in it. There were sad face emojis, comments from people offering him a couch to sleep on, friends from high school, old neighbors, people who barely knew either of us chiming in with sympathy. For a second, just a second, I felt that old familiar twinge of guilt, that little whisper in my ear saying, maybe you were too harsh. Maybe you should have handled it privately. But then I remembered 15 years of late-night phone calls asking for bail money, 15 years of rent payments, gas money, couch crashing, endless second chances. And I remembered that damn broken defibrillator. So instead of arguing or throwing a tantrum like Darren wanted, I opened a new post. No drama, no name-calling, just facts. I attached screenshots of every bank transfer I made to cover his rent, utilities, even that car he still drove. Screenshots of text messages where he promised to pay me back next month, dated years ago, with no repayment ever made. And of course, a short clip someone had sent me from the party, the moment Darren handed me the broken defibrillator, the note on top clearly visible, and the awkward laughter that followed. I kept my caption simple. The truth speaks for itself. I wish him the best. I hit post. Then I put my phone down and went about my day. By evening, the tide had started turning. The likes on Darren's sob story slowed down. Some comments were deleted. A few people even messaged me privately to apologize for jumping to conclusions. And Darren? He deleted the entire post without a word. Later that night, I got a text from him. Just 3 words. "You're dead to me." I stared at the screen for a second, then snorted and blocked his number. Dead to him? Please. I had been dead to him the minute I stopped being useful. The peace that settled over me after that was something I hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly. Not triumph. Just calm. And I realized that was even better. A week later, the call came. I was out in the backyard pulling weeds when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I wiped my hands on my jeans and answered without even checking the caller ID. It was my dad. For a second, neither of us said anything. Just the low hum of wine through the phone. Then he cleared his throat. "He's out." I blinked, not quite processing it. "What?" "Darren," he said, a little softer. "He moved out. Last night. Took whatever junk he could fit into that beat-up car. Rest is still there." I sat down on the back step, feeling my knees wobble just a little. "Where's he staying?" I asked after a minute. Dad let out a long sigh. Couchsurfing, friend of a friend. Not a good setup, but he'll survive. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. There was another long pause, like he wasn't sure what came next. Finally, he said, "You were right, Lila. We should have listened a long time ago." The words hung there in the air, heavier than they had any right to be. It wasn't a full apology, not even close. But coming from my dad, a man who once called apologizing a sign of weakness, it was more than I ever thought I'd get. I could have told him off. I could have listed every time they chose to believe Darren's excuses over my reality, every time they guilt-tripped me into cleaning up another mess. But I didn't. I was too tired, too done. Instead, I just said, "Thanks for calling." He exhaled, maybe with relief, maybe with something heavier. "You doing okay?" I looked around at my little backyard, the patchy grass, the half-finished flower bed, the tools scattered everywhere, and for the first time in a long time, it actually felt like mine. "I'm good," I said. "Really?" We said goodbye after that. Short and awkward, but it didn't bother me, because Darren was out, for real this time, and for the first time since I could remember, the air around me didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt wide open. It had been 3 months, 3 full months without hearing Darren's name, seeing his number pop up, or getting sucked into another mess of his making. I had finally started to breathe easy, like I wasn't waiting for the next disaster to land at my doorstep. And then, like clockwork, my phone buzzed one evening while I was flipping through a new book on the porch. "Darren, hey sis, I've changed. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, letting out a long breath through my nose. Of course he hadn't actually changed. Guys like Darren didn't change, they just ran out of people willing to fix their messes. Before I could even think about responding, a second message came in. "Darren, also, any chance I could crash at your place for a while? Just until I'm back on my feet." There it was. The real reason for the "I've changed" act. I leaned back in my chair, staring up at the soft pink clouds drifting across the sky. I wasn't even mad. I didn't feel hurt, or guilty, or torn the way I might have a year ago. I felt done. Completely, peacefully done. I tapped out a reply, my fingers steady and sure. "You burned that bridge. I'm not your safety net anymore." I read it twice, making sure it said exactly what I meant. Then I hit send, and after a second, I blocked his number. No long arguments. No rehashing old wounds. No opening the door a crack because he might finally mean it this time. It was clean, final, simple. The porch light flickered on as the sun dipped low, casting a soft glow across the yard. I pulled my sweater tighter around me, took a sip of my tea, and turned the page of my book. Somewhere out there, Darren would probably spin up a new story, maybe to our family, maybe to some new sucker who hadn't learned yet. But it wasn't my problem anymore. I had closed that chapter, and for once, it was going to stay closed. It's funny how quiet life feels once you stop carrying other people's messes. 3 months after I blocked Darren's number, I hardly thought about him anymore. Some days, I didn't think about him at all. Instead, I found myself doing things I hadn't done in years. Little things that didn't seem like much, but they stitched a new kind of life together. I joined a book club at the library downtown, signed up for a volunteer shift at the community center, teaching CPR classes once a week, reconnected with some old friends from high school, people I hadn't seen since before life got so heavy and complicated. My house felt different too, lighter somehow, like it had finally caught its breath right alongside me. The spare bedroom, the one Darren had practically taken over for years, was now my reading room. I painted the walls a soft blue, put up some bookshelves, and filled it with sunlight and peace. One afternoon, I sat out on the back porch with Trish from work, sipping iced tea and swapping stories about old ambulance calls. She laughed so hard she almost dropped her glass when I told her about the time we delivered twins in the parking lot of a Burger King. At one point, she leaned back in her chair and asked, "Do you miss him at all?" It took me half a second to realize who she meant. "Darren." I smiled, real easy. No bitterness, no sadness, not even a little, I said. And it was the truth. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the next apology that would never come, or the next disaster I'd be expected to fix. I wasn't tiptoeing around someone else's feelings or bracing myself for the next guilt trip. I was just living, not chasing peace, not earning it, just letting it be. The sun dipped lower, the sky turning that perfect kind of orange and pink that never quite looks the same in pictures. I leaned back in my chair, sipped my tea, and let the moment stretch long and sweet. I had a whole life ahead of me now, and it was finally mine.